Sarah Martinez barely noticed her grandfather's dusty hunting rifle hanging over the fireplace in their modest farmhouse. It seemed like just another old decoration collecting memories. At 17, she juggled shifts at the neighborhood diner after classes, putting away money for her future. Her goals were straightforward: leave their quiet Montana community, pursue journalism studies, and explore beyond the mountains. Her grandfather, Miguel Santos, spent his days in peaceful silence on the front porch, carving wood and gazing at the distant peaks. He kept his history close to his chest. When Sarah's friends spotted the military decorations in his room, he'd simply grin and shift topics. The locals held him in high regard, though none could say exactly why. Rumors floated around, maybe Vietnam, possibly Korea. Miguel never confirmed anything either way. Everything shifted on an October Tuesday afternoon. Sarah walked home from the diner when sudden yells erupted from the neighboring Henderson farm. Their massive bull had broken free and was charging directly at 6-year-old Tommy Henderson. The child stood frozen, unable to move as the huge beast thundered closer. Acting on pure instinct, Sarah snatched up a rock and hurled it with all her strength. The rock struck the bull right between its eyes, halting it completely. The confused animal shook its head, then calmly wandered off. Everyone watching stood stunned. The throw had been flawless, nearly 40 yards with pinpoint accuracy. "How on earth did you manage that?" Tommy's mother, Lisa Henderson, gasped in disbelief. "I've witnessed nothing like it." Sarah could only shrug. She truly had no explanation. The motion felt automatic, like tossing a ball to a companion. She'd always been skilled at hitting things, crumpled paper into bins, stones skipping across water, but never thought much of it. That night during dinner, Miguel seemed unusually withdrawn. He kept stealing glances at Sarah, as though seeing someone entirely new. At last, he broke his silence. "Granddaughter, your grandmother used to share stories about you as a little one. She claimed you could hit a fly on the wall with a rubber band from the other side of the room. I figured she was just being a proud grandmother." Sarah laughed. "Grandma always made everything bigger than it was. You know how she was." But Miguel's face stayed serious. He rose and approached the fireplace. His weathered hands reached up, carefully lifting down the old rifle. Sarah had never watched him touch it before. "This weapon once belonged to my instructor," he said softly. "A man who showed me things I never expected to learn, things that kept me breathing for many years." Sarah's mother, Maria, shifted uncomfortably. "Father, perhaps we should finish eating while the food's still warm." Miguel paid no attention. He examined the rifle with the same focus he gave his wood carvings. "Sarah, would you like to learn the proper way to handle this?" The question caught everyone off guard. Miguel had shown zero interest in firearms or hunting for as long as Sarah could recall. Her father, Roberto, worked construction and knew little about guns. Their household had always been calm, centered on work and modest joys. "I'm not sure, Grandpa. I've never really considered it." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "Tomorrow's Saturday. We'll visit the old quarry, just the two of us." That night, sleep wouldn't come to Sarah. Her mind kept replaying how her grandfather had looked at her, and the incident with the bull. Did her aim truly stand out? She'd always assumed throwing accurately was normal for everyone. She captained the softball team at school, but chalked that up to practice and chance. She got up and peered through her window toward the quarry, an abandoned limestone pit roughly 2 miles from home, ringed by hills and completely isolated. Nobody visited anymore except teenagers seeking privacy. Next morning, Miguel was already up when Sarah came downstairs. He'd made a basic breakfast and packed a small bag with water and sandwiches. The rifle sat cleaned and prepared, accompanied by a box of bullets that looked quite aged. "Where did those come from, Father?" Maria asked nervously. "I've kept them for a very long time. They still work fine." Miguel's tone stopped any further questions. As they walked to the quarry, Miguel talked more than Sarah had ever heard. He shared stories about growing up in Mexico, coming to America as a young man, meeting her grandmother at a church dance. Yet he still avoided mentioning the rifle or any military background. At the quarry, Miguel arranged a series of targets using old cans and bottles from home. He positioned them at varying distances, some nearby, others quite far. Then he demonstrated proper rifle handling, breathing techniques, and how to squeeze the trigger gently. "Don't overthink it," he instructed. "Trust what your eyes see. Trust what your hands know. You already understand this." Sarah's opening shot went wide. The second clipped a can's edge. But with the third shot, Something connected. The rifle felt natural in her grasp, like it belonged there. She hit the next 5 targets consecutively, each shot more assured than the previous one. Miguel observed quietly, his expression blank, but Sarah noticed something changing in his gaze, a blend of pride and concern she couldn't grasp. "How am I doing this, Grandpa?" she asked, after hitting a bottle at least 100 yards distant. Miguel stayed silent for several moments. Then he settled onto a fallen log and stared at the mountains. "Your great-grandfather was a hunter. Your grandmother's brother ranked among the finest marksmen in the Mexican military. And he paused, selecting his words carefully. I studied under someone who surpassed them all, combined. A man who could strike targets at distances that seemed beyond possibility. A man who showed me that shooting involves more than just weapons and bullets. It's about perceiving the world differently, understanding wind, distance, and timing in ways most people never grasp." Sarah waited for him to elaborate. Instead, Miguel stood and began packing the rifle. "That's sufficient for today. We'll return next week." Walking home, Sarah's thoughts raced with questions. Who was this mysterious teacher? Why had her grandfather kept all this hidden? And why did holding that rifle feel as natural as breathing? The following weeks established a pattern Sarah anticipated more than anything in her life. Every Saturday morning, she and Miguel trekked to the quarry with the old rifle. With each session, her precision improved dramatically. What began as beginner's luck clearly became something exceptional. Miguel started teaching her things that seemed impossible. He showed her how to gauge wind speed by watching grass movement, how to estimate distance by examining shadows, how to control her heartbeat to shoot between beats. Most remarkably, he taught her to hit moving objects by understanding their patterns and anticipating their positions. "Your teacher must have been amazing," Sarah commented one afternoon after successfully striking a tin can Miguel had tossed into the air. Miguel nodded. Carlos Menendez was his name, though most called him Ghost. Ghost? Because nobody ever detected his approach. He could appear and vanish like smoke. He trained me in the Guatemalan mountains during a time when shooting skill meant survival or death. Sarah absorbed this quietly. She'd never known her grandfather had lived through anything dangerous. In her mind, he'd always been the gentle old man who crafted wooden toys for neighborhood kids and grew the finest tomatoes around. "Were you a soldier, Grandpa?" Miguel remained silent for several minutes, focused on cleaning the rifle. Finally, he met her eyes with a tired look. "I was many things, granddaughter. Some I'm proud of, others," he shrugged. "Others were necessary." That week at school, Sarah found herself distracted. During journalism class, while classmates discussed current events, she pondered bullet paths. In math, she mentally calculated distances and angles. Her best friend, Jessica, noticed the change. "What's happening with you lately? You seem different, more focused but also sort of distant." Sarah couldn't explain the shooting lessons. Something told her to keep it private, at least for now. She simply said she was spending more time with her grandfather, which was truthful enough. The next Saturday brought an unexpected challenge. When Sarah and Miguel reached the quarry, they found 3 teenagers from her school there, drinking beer and blasting music. One was Derek Thompson, a popular senior who'd asked Sarah to homecoming and been politely turned down. "Well, look who's here," Derek called out, clearly drunk. Little Sarah and her grandpa playing with guns. Miguel's demeanor transformed instantly. Sarah had never seen him stand so straight or look so alert. His eyes scanned the area, taking in every detail of their surroundings. And the 3 boys. "We'll come back another time," Miguel said quietly to Sarah. But Derek wasn't finished. "Actually, this could be entertaining. Sarah, I bet you can't hit that bottle over there. If you can, I'll give you $50. If you miss, you come to the dance with me." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. She hated being challenged like this, especially by someone like Derek, who thought money could buy anything. "I don't want to go to the dance with you," she said firmly. "Come on, it's just a friendly wager. Unless you're scared." Miguel placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We should leave, granddaughter." But Sarah had already decided. The bottle Derek pointed to sat at least 150 yards away, partially hidden behind a rock. It would be a difficult shot, even with her improved abilities, but something inside her refused to back down. "Fine," she said, "but when I hit it, you leave me alone forever. Deal?" Derek grinned. "Deal." Sarah took the rifle from Miguel, who looked worried but didn't try to stop her. She studied the target, noting the slight breeze moving the grass. The bottle was small, probably a beer bottle, and the afternoon light created shadows, making it hard to see clearly. She took a deep breath, just as Miguel had taught her. She felt her heartbeat slow and her vision sharp. The sounds around her seemed to fade, until only the target and her breathing remained. The shot echoed across the quarry. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Derek's friend Jake pointed toward the rock. Holy crap, she actually hit it. The bottle had completely vanished, shattered into tiny pieces. Sarah handed the rifle back to Miguel, who stared at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Derek and his friends left quickly, clearly uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed. When they were gone, Miguel sat down heavily on the ground. Sarah, that wasn't a normal shot. That was the kind of shooting that requires years to develop, even with natural talent, even with good training. That shot should have been impossible for someone with only a few weeks of practice. But I made it. Isn't that good? It is. Miguel paused, searching for the right word. It's the kind of shot Ghost would have been proud of. The kind of shot that only comes from having the gift. What gift? Miguel stood and began walking toward home, his movement slower than usual. Sarah had to hurry to keep up. There are people in this world who can do things that others cannot. They see angles that others miss. They understand movement and timing in ways that cannot be taught. Ghost told me that these people are born maybe once in a generation, maybe less. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying I'm one of these people? I'm saying that Carlos Menendez spent his entire life looking for someone to pass his knowledge to. He taught me because I was a good student, but I was never great. I could hit what I aimed at, but I couldn't do the impossible things that he could do. They walked in silence for several minutes. Finally, Sarah asked the question, building in her mind for weeks. Where is Ghost now? Is he still alive? Miguel stopped walking. When he turned to look at her, his eyes were filled with sadness. Ghost died 23 years ago, granddaughter. He died saving the lives of people he'd never met in a place very far from here. But before he died, he made me promise something. What? He made me promise that if I ever found someone with the true gift, someone who could learn what he knew, I would teach them everything, not just how to shoot, but how to think like a sniper, how to be invisible, how to make shots that others would call impossible. Sarah's heart was pounding. And you think I might be that person? Miguel reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and yellowed, covered with Spanish writing and faded ink. This is a letter Ghost wrote before he died. He told me to give it to his successor when I found them. I never thought I'd need to give it to my own granddaughter. Sarah took the letter with trembling hands. Even though she couldn't read all the Spanish words, she could see detailed diagrams and notes about advanced shooting techniques. What does this mean for me, Grandpa? Miguel put his arm around her shoulders as they continued walking toward home. It means, granddaughter, that your real training is about to begin. The letter from Ghost changed everything. That night, Sarah sat in her bedroom with a Spanish dictionary, slowly translating the faded words. What she found was not just shooting instructions, but a complete philosophy about precision, patience, and responsibility. The rifle is not a weapon, Ghost had written. It is an extension of your mind and your moral compass. Every shot you take will echo through time. Choose them wisely. The diagrams showed shooting positions she'd never seen, breathing techniques that seemed almost like meditation, and mathematical calculations for shots at distances that made her head spin. Most importantly, there were warnings about the psychological effects of developing such skill. Power without wisdom is destruction. The letter continued. You must learn not just how to shoot, but when not to shoot. The greatest marksman is often the one who never pulls the trigger. Miguel noticed her studying the letter every night after dinner. On the following Saturday, instead of going to the quarry, he led her deep into the mountains behind their property. They hiked for 2 hours before reaching a hidden valley Sarah had never known existed. This is where Ghost taught me, Miguel explained. It's far from town, far from curious eye. Here you can learn without anyone asking questions. The valley was perfect for long-distance shooting. It stretched for nearly a mile with natural rock formations that could serve as both cover and target platforms. At one end, there was a small cave where someone had stored equipment years ago. Inside the cave, Sarah discovered things that took her breath away. There were rifles she'd never seen before, with scopes that looked like they belonged in science fiction movies. There were detailed maps of the surrounding area marked with distances and wind patterns. Most shocking of all, there were photographs. The photographs showed a younger Miguel alongside a man who could only be Ghost. Carlos Menendez was smaller than Sarah had imagined, with intense dark eyes and hands that looked capable of incredible precision. But what struck her most was how ordinary he appeared. If she'd passed him on the street, she would never have guessed he was anything more than a regular person. He always said that the best snipers are invisible, even when they're standing right in front of you, Miguel explained, noticing her studying the photos. Ghost could disappear into any crowd, any landscape. He taught me that being unseen is more important than being fast. Over the following months, Miguel's training became more intense and sophisticated. He taught Sarah to estimate distances by studying the size of objects, to read wind patterns by watching birds fly, and to remain perfectly still for hours at a time. Most difficult of all, he taught her to think like a sniper. It's not enough to hit the target, he would say. You must understand everything around the target. Who might be watching? Where would you go if you needed to leave quickly? What would happen after the shot? A sniper thinks 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Sarah's regular life began to feel strange and disconnected. At school, while her classmates worried about tests and social drama, she was mentally calculating angles and exit strategy. During her shifts at the diner, she found herself automatically noting which customers sat with their backs to walls and which ones seemed to be watching the street. Her friend Jessica became increasingly suspicious. You're different, Sarah. You notice things that other people don't. Yesterday, you knew that car was going to backfire before it happened. Last week, you predicted exactly where that football was going to land during the game. What's going on? Sarah struggled to find explanations that wouldn't reveal her training. She told Jessica that her grandfather was teaching her to be more observant for her journalism goals, which was partially true, but the real reason was that Miguel was teaching her to see the world the way Ghost had seen it. A sniper notices everything, Miguel explained during one of their mountain sessions. The way a person walks can tell you if they're carrying a weapon. The direction someone looks can reveal what they're thinking. You must learn to read the world like a book. The most challenging part of her training was learning to control her emotions. Miguel would create stressful situations, making loud noises while she was aiming or telling her stories about dangerous situations while she tried to concentrate. He taught her that fear, anger, and excitement were the enemies of precision. Ghost told me that the mind of a sniper must be like still water, Miguel said. Emotions create ripples, and ripples make you miss your target. After 6 months of intensive training, Sarah could consistently hit targets at distances that seemed impossible. She could shoot accurately while lying down, kneeling, or even standing. More importantly, she had developed what Miguel called sniper sense, an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings. But Miguel seemed troubled by her rapid progress. One evening, as they were returning from the hidden valley, he stopped and sat down on a fallen tree. Sarah, I need to tell you something important. Ghost didn't just teach me how to shoot. He also told me about the world that people like him live in. What kind of world? A world where governments and powerful people sometimes need problems solved quietly. A world where someone with your skills might be asked to do things that regular people never have to consider. Sarah felt a cold fear creeping into her stomach. Are you saying people might want to hire me as a killer? Miguel nodded gravely. Your abilities are becoming extraordinary. Soon they'll become impossible to hide. When that happens, certain people will notice. They'll make offers that seem very attractive. Money, adventure, the chance to serve your country. But Ghost warned me that once you enter that world, it becomes very difficult to leave. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about Miguel's warning. She'd begun her training as a way to spend time with her grandfather and explore a natural talent. She never imagined it might lead to a life of danger and moral complexity. But even as she worried about the future, she couldn't deny the thrill she felt when she made impossible shots. There was something deeply satisfying about the perfect alignment of mind, body, and rifle that resulted in absolute precision. She was beginning to understand why Ghost had devoted his life to this skill. The next morning brought an unexpected test. Sarah was walking to school when she heard screaming from the town's main street. A man with a knife was holding the bank manager hostage outside First National Bank. Police had surrounded the area, but they couldn't get a clear shot without risking the hostage's life. Sarah found herself automatically analyzing the situation. The attacker was standing behind his hostage, but she could see a small part of his shoulder. The distance was about 80 yards. The wind was minimal. If she had her rifle, she could disable him without hurting the innocent man. But she didn't have her rifle. She was just a 17-year-old girl on her way to school, carrying nothing more dangerous than textbooks and a lunch her mother had packed. As she watched the police struggle with the situation, Sarah realized that her training had fundamentally changed how she saw the world. She was no longer just an observer of events. She had become someone who could potentially influence them. For the first time, she truly understood what Ghost had meant about power and responsibility. Having the ability to solve problems with precision came with the burden of deciding when and how to use that ability. The hostage situation ended peacefully when the attacker surrendered to police. But as Sarah continued to school, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads. Her training with Miguel had given her incredible skills, but it had also given her knowledge of a world that most people never knew existed. She was no longer just Sarah Martinez, the small-town girl who wanted to study journalism. She was becoming someone else entirely, someone with capabilities that could change lives with the squeeze of a trigger. The question was, what kind of person did she want to become? Sarah's 18th birthday came and went without celebration. She'd been accepted to 3 different colleges, but the acceptance letters sat unopened on her dresser. How could she explain to admissions counselors that she'd spent her senior year learning skills that most military snipers took years to master? Miguel sensed her internal struggle. During their training sessions in the Hidden Valley, he began sharing more stories about Ghost and the choices that had shaped both their lives. Carlos Menendez wasn't born to be a sniper, Miguel told her one afternoon as they practiced shooting at extreme distances. He was studying to be a teacher when the Civil War came to Guatemala. He learned to shoot because his village needed protecting. He became Ghost because ordinary shooting wasn't enough to keep innocent people alive. Sarah lowered her rifle and looked at her grandfather. Do you think he regretted it, becoming what he became? Miguel was quiet for a long moment, watching an eagle circle high above the valley. He saved my life 7 times. He saved the lives of at least 50 other people that I know about, but every shot he took changed him a little bit. By the time I knew him, there was a sadness in his eyes that never went away. Is that why you never told anyone about your training? Why you came back here and became a farmer? I wanted to forget what I'd learned. I wanted to be normal again. But Ghost told me that knowledge like this cannot be buried forever. He said it would find a way to pass itself on when the world needed it. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching. Sarah and Miguel quickly packed their equipment and moved to the mouth of the cave. Through the trees, they could see 3 black SUVs parked at the entrance to their valley. Men in dark suits were getting out, and they clearly knew exactly where they were going. One carried what looked like a briefcase, another had binoculars and was scanning the mountainside. Miguel Santos, the lead man, called out, his voice echoing across the valley. We know you're up there. We just want to talk. Miguel's face had gone pale. Sarah had never seen him look frightened before, but there was genuine fear in his eyes now. Who are they? Sarah whispered. The kind of people Ghost warned me about. The kind of people who notice when someone develops exceptional skills. Sarah Martinez, the man called out again. We have a proposition that might interest you. We know about your training. We know about your abilities. We're here to offer you opportunities that most people can only dream about. Sarah felt her heart racing. How did these strangers know her name? How did they know about her training? She and Miguel had been so careful to keep everything secret. They've been watching us, Miguel said quietly, probably for months, maybe longer. The lead man began walking up the trail toward their position. He moved with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Miss Martinez, my name is Director Harrison. I represent certain government agencies that are always looking for individuals with your particular talents. We can offer you training that goes far beyond what your grandfather has taught you. We can offer you purpose, excitement, and compensation that would set you up for life. Sarah looked at Miguel, who was shaking his head firmly. What if I'm not interested? Sarah called back. Director Harrison smiled. Everyone's interested when they understand what we're offering. College scholarships to the best schools in the country, advanced training with the most sophisticated equipment available, the chance to serve your country in ways that truly matter. And if I still say no, Harrison's smile faded slightly. Well, let's just say that people with your abilities sometimes attract the wrong kind of attention if they're not properly protected. There are organizations out there that might not be as polite as we are. The threat was subtle but clear. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but Miguel placed a warning hand on her arm. We need time to think about this, Miguel called out. Of course, But don't take too much time. The world can be a dangerous place for people who try to stay neutral. Harrison handed a business card to one of his subordinates, who placed it on a rock where Sarah and Miguel could easily find it. Miss Martinez, you have a gift that could change the world. The question is, will you use it for the right people, or will you let it go to waste? The three SUVs left as quietly as they'd arrived, but their message was unmistakable. Sarah's secret was no longer secret. That evening, Sarah and Miguel sat at their kitchen table staring at Director Harrison's business card. It was plain white with only a phone number and a small symbol that looked like an eagle. "They're not going to just go away, are they?" Sarah asked. Miguel shook his head. "People like that never go away once they decide they want something." Ghost told me stories about recruiters who would follow potential snipers for years, waiting for the right moment to make their offers. What did Ghost do when they came for him? He joined them, but he always regretted it. He told me that once you work for people like that, you become a tool. You lose control over how your skills are used. Sarah's mother entered the kitchen, sensing the tension in the room. "What's wrong? You both look like you've seen ghosts." Miguel and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd never told Maria about the training sessions, or Sarah's developing ability. To her, they were just grandfather and granddaughter spending time together in the mountains. "Mother," Sarah said carefully, "what would you say if I told you I had a talent that could either help people or hurt people depending on how I used it?" Maria sat down at the table, studying her daughter's face. "I would say that describes almost any talent, daughter. A person who can sing beautifully can inspire people or break their hearts. A person who can write well can tell the truth or spread lies. The talent itself is not good or bad. It's the choices you make that matter." Her words hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. She'd been thinking about her sniper abilities as something separate from herself, something that might control her destiny, but her mother was right. The skills were just tools. The important question was how she chose to use them. That night, Sarah made a decision. She would not call Director Harrison's number, she would not join whatever organization he represented, but she would also not ignore her abilities. Instead, she would find her own path. The next morning, she opened her college acceptance letters and chose the one from Montana State University. She would study criminal justice and journalism, learning about law enforcement and investigation. She would keep training with Miguel, but she would also develop other skills. Most importantly, she would prepare herself for the day when her abilities might be needed to protect innocent people, not serve the interests of shadowy government agencies. Sarah didn't know it yet, but her decision to forge her own path would lead to a confrontation that would test everything Ghost and Miguel had taught her. The world was full of people who preyed on the innocent, and some of them were about to learn that there was a new protector watching from the shadows. But for now, she was content to be Sarah Martinez, college-bound student who happened to be able to make impossible shots. The legend of the girl who couldn't miss would have to wait a little longer to be born. 2 years passed before Sarah's abilities were truly put to the test. She was now a sophomore at Montana State University, studying criminal justice and excelling in all her classes. She still returned home every weekend to train with Miguel, and her skills had continued to develop beyond anything either of them had imagined possible. The test came on a cold February morning, when Sarah was visiting home for winter break. She was drinking coffee with Miguel on the front porch when her phone rang. It was Sheriff Davidson, a family friend who'd known Sarah since she was a child. "Sarah, I know this is unusual, but I need your help. We have a situation that our department isn't equipped to handle, and I remember you mentioning that your grandfather taught you some shooting skills." Sarah's heart began racing. "What kind of situation, Sheriff?" "There's a man named Vincent Torres who's taken 3 hikers hostage up in Glacier Pass. He's armed with a high-powered rifle and positioned himself where our SWAT team can't get close. The hostages are a family from California, 2 parents and their teenage daughter. Torres is demanding a helicopter and $2 million, but honestly, I don't think he plans to let those people go alive." Sarah looked at Miguel, who'd been listening to the conversation. His face was grim but determined. "Why are you calling me instead of the FBI or state police?" Sarah asked. "Because Torres is positioned on a cliff face about 400 yards from the nearest place we can set up. None of my officers can make that shot, and by the time we get specialized help here, those people will be dead. But if what I've heard about your grandfather's military training is true, and if he's taught you even half of what he knows..." Sheriff Davidson didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah understood what he was asking. He wanted her to kill a man to save 3 innocent lives. Miguel took the phone from her hands. "Sheriff, this is Miguel. Give us the exact location and tactical situation. We'll be there in 20 minutes. As they drove toward Glacier Pass, Miguel was unusually talkative. It was as if he knew this moment had been inevitable and had been preparing for it in his mind for years. Ghost told me that there would come a day when I would have to choose between staying hidden and using what I knew to save innocent lives. That day never came for me, but it has come for you. I'm scared, Grandpa. What if I miss? What if I make things worse? You will not miss. I've been training you for 2 years, and you've never missed when it truly mattered. But more importantly, Ghost taught me that fear is not the enemy. Doubt is the enemy. Fear keeps you alert. Doubt makes your hands shake. When they arrived at the sheriff's command post, Sarah was surprised by how young Torres looked through the high-powered binoculars. He couldn't have been more than 25 with the lean build of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. But his eyes held a wildness that made Sarah's skin crawl. He's high on something, Sheriff Davidson explained. Probably methamphetamines. He's been screaming at the hostages for the past hour, and his behavior is getting more erratic. Sarah studied the tactical situation with the methodical approach Miguel had taught her. Torres had positioned himself on a narrow ledge about halfway up a cliff face. The hostages were tied up about 10 feet away from him, close enough that he could shoot them instantly if he felt threatened. The angle was extreme, and the distance was at the very limit of what most professional snipers would consider possible. But Sarah had been training for shots like this. Miguel had taught her to handle extreme angles, long distances, and high-stress situations. More importantly, Ghost's letter had contained detailed instructions for shooting in mountainous terrain with unpredictable wind patterns. I need to get to a higher position, Sarah told the sheriff. Somewhere that gives me a clear line of sight without Torres seeing me. Sheriff Davidson pointed to a rocky outcrop about half a mile away. That ridge would give you the angle you need, but it's a difficult climb, and you'd be shooting at a distance of nearly 600 yards. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. 600 yards was farther than she'd ever shot at a living target, but she'd hit stationary targets at that distance dozens of times during her training with Miguel. I can make that shot, she said. With more confidence than she felt, Miguel handed her a rifle case she'd never seen before. Inside was the most beautiful weapon she'd ever held, a custom-built rifle with a scope that seemed to gather light from everywhere around it. This was Ghost rifle, Miguel said quietly. He left it for his successor. Today, you become what he always knew you could be. Sarah took the rifle with reverence. It felt perfect in her hands, as if it had been designed specifically for her. The weight was distributed exactly right, and the scope provided crystal clear vision, even in the mountain shadows. The climb to the ridge took 15 minutes. With each step, Sarah felt herself entering the mental state that Miguel had taught her to cultivate. Her breathing became steady and controlled. Her awareness expanded to include every detail of her surroundings. The direction of the wind, the angle of the sun, the exact distance to her target. When she reached the shooting position, Sarah carefully set up the rifle and studied Torres through the scope. He was pacing back and forth on the narrow ledge, waving his weapon erratically. The 3 hostages were huddled together, their faces showing absolute terror. Sarah's radio crackled. Sarah, this is Sheriff Davidson. Torres just gave us a 5-minute ultimatum. If we don't produce the helicopter by then, he says he's going to start shooting the hostages. Through her scope, Sarah could see Torres becoming increasingly agitated. He was pointing his rifle at the family and shouting something she couldn't hear from this distance. The teenage girl was crying, and her parents were trying to shield her with their bodies. Sarah steadied herself and began the mental checklist that Miguel had drilled into her thousands of times. Wind speed and direction: minimal crosswind from the west. Distance, 587 yards according to her rangefinder. Target movement. Torres was moving in a predictable pattern, pausing for approximately 3 seconds at the left side of the ledge, before pacing to the right. Sarah, you have a clear shot. Miguel's voice came through her earpiece. Affirmative. Target is moving in a pattern. I can predict his position. Remember what Ghost wrote in his letter. The shot that saves innocent lives is always justified. You're not taking a life, you're preserving 3 lives. Sarah waited for Torres to complete his pacing pattern twice more, confirming his timing. On his third approach to the left side of the ledge, she would take the shot. As Torres began his final pace toward her targeting zone, Sarah felt everything around her fade away. There was no wind, no cold, no pressure from the hostages' lives hanging in the balance. There was only the rifle, the target, and the absolute certainty that came from perfect preparation. Torres paused at the left side of the ledge, exactly as he'd done twice before. For a split second, he was perfectly still, his rifle lowered as he looked out over the valley. Sarah's shot echoed across the mountains like thunder. Torres dropped instantly, his weapon clattering down the cliff face. The hostages, freed from their immediate danger, began calling for help. Target down,
Sarah reported into her radio, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she'd just done. Hostages appear unharmed. The rescue operation moved quickly. Within an hour, the 3 hikers were safely evacuated from the cliff face and receiving medical attention. Torres had died instantly from Sarah's shot, which had hit him center mass with perfect precision. Sheriff Davidson found Sarah sitting alone on the ridge, staring out at the mountains. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. She'd just killed a human being, even though it was to save innocent lives. The weight of that action was settling on her like a heavy blanket. "The FBI is going to want to interview you," the sheriff continued. "This is going to attract attention. Word gets out that a 20-year-old college student made a 600-yard shot to save hostages, and people are going to start asking questions." Sarah understood what he was really saying. Her secret was about to become very public, and that meant Director Harrison and his organization would be back. Miguel appeared beside them, having made the difficult climb up to the ridge. "Granddaughter, you did what Ghost would have done. You saved innocent lives. But now we must prepare for what comes next." "What comes next?" "Now the world will know what you can do, and there are people in this world who will want to use your abilities for purposes that are not as noble as what you did today." As they descended from the ridge, Sarah realized that her life had just changed forever. She was no longer just a college student with an unusual hobby. She was someone who had proven capable of making life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. The legend of the girl who couldn't miss had just been born, witnessed by law enforcement officials, and soon to be reported in newspapers across the country. But Sarah was determined that this legend would be written on her own terms. She had chosen to use her abilities to protect the innocent, and that choice would guide every decision she made going forward. Director Harrison and his shadowy organization could come calling again. This time she would be ready for them. The news story hit the national media within 48 hours. College student makes 600-yard shot to save hostages. Ran on every major news network. Sarah's name was kept out of the initial reports at Sheriff Davidson's insistence, but it was only a matter of time before investigative journalists discovered her identity. Sarah returned to the university early, hoping to avoid the media attention, but she found Director Harrison waiting in her dorm room when she arrived. "Impressive work at Glacier Pass," he said, not bothering to explain how he'd gotten past campus security. "Though I have to say, we're disappointed you didn't contact us before taking such action. We could have provided support, equipment, backup." "I didn't need backup," Sarah replied, setting down her bags and facing him directly. "And I certainly didn't need permission from your organization to save innocent lives." Harrison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Miss Martinez, I think you misunderstand the situation. What you did was heroic, but it was also very public. By tomorrow, every intelligence agency, criminal organization, and terrorist group in the world will know that there's a 20-year-old American girl who can make impossible shots. Is that supposed to scare me? It should, because some of those organizations are going to want to recruit you, and others are going to want to eliminate you before you become a threat to their operations. Either way, you're no longer safe living as a normal college student." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. "What are you proposing? Join us officially. We can provide protection, advanced training, and meaningful work. You could be part of a team that prevents international incidents, stops terrorist attacks, and protects American interests around the world. And if I refuse," Harrison's expression darkened, "then you'll be on your own against some very dangerous people. Your grandfather taught you well, but he never faced the kind of enemies that will be coming for you now." That evening, Sarah called Miguel to discuss Harrison's offer, but when she tried his cell phone, a stranger answered. "Who is this?" Sarah demanded. "This is Agent Chen with the F." "Ma'am, are you related to Miguel Santos?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "I'm his granddaughter. What's happened?" "There was an incident at your grandfather's property earlier today. 3 men attempted to break into his house. Mr. Santos defended himself, but he was injured in the process. He's currently in stable condition at Mercy General Hospital." Sarah was on the road within an hour. Driving through the night to reach the hospital, she found Miguel awake but bandaged, with 2 FBI agents stationed outside his room. "They came for me to get to you," Miguel said, when he saw her. 3 professionals, probably foreign operatives. "They wanted information about your training, your abilities, your weaknesses. Did they get anything?" Miguel smiled grimly. "They underestimated an old man. Ghost taught me more than just shooting granddaughter. But this proves what Harrison told you. You're no longer hidden." Over the next week, Sarah's situation became increasingly clear. Foreign intelligence services had indeed taken notice of the Glacier Pass incident. The FBI had intercepted communications from at least 2 criminal organizations, expressing interest in either recruiting or eliminating her. Most troubling of all, a known arms dealer had put a price on her head, apparently viewing her as a threat to his operation. Sarah realized she was facing an impossible choice. She could join Harrison's organization and lose her independence, or she could remain on her own and constantly look over her shoulder for enemies she might not see coming. But Miguel had taught her that impossible situations sometimes had solutions that others couldn't see. There's a third option, she told Harrison when he visited her again. I work with you on specific operations, but I maintain my independence. I choose which missions to accept. I keep my civilian life, and I keep my moral autonomy. Harrison laughed. That's not how government agencies work, Miss Martinez. You can't be a part-time operative. Then maybe it's time for government agencies to learn new ways of work. To Sarah's surprise, Harrison considered her proposal seriously. After several phone calls to his superiors, he returned with a counteroffer. We're willing to try an experimental arrangement. You would be classified as an independent contractor rather than an employee. You would have the right to refuse missions that conflict with your personal ethics. In exchange, you would provide consultation on long-range precision operations and be available for emergency situations that require your specific skills and protection for my family. Your grandfather will receive round-the-clock security until the current threats are neutralized. Your parents will be relocated to a safe community where they can continue their normal lives under assumed identities if they choose. Sarah spent 3 days considering the offer. She walked through the mountains, where Ghost had taught Miguel and where Miguel had taught her. She thought about the 3 hikers whose lives she'd saved, and about the unknown number of innocent people she might be able to help in the future. Finally, she made her decision. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez officially became the first independent contractor in the CIA's Special Activities Division. She maintained her cover as a college student, but she was also available for operations that required precision shooting beyond the capabilities of standard military snipers. Her first official mission was stopping an arms dealer who was selling weapons to terrorist organizations. Her second was preventing an assassination attempt on a peace negotiator in Eastern Europe. Her third was rescuing hostages from a hijacked airplane. Each mission reinforced her conviction that she'd chosen the right path. She was using Ghost training and Miguel's wisdom to protect innocent people and serve the greater good, but she was doing it on her own terms. The legend of the girl who couldn't miss grew with each successful operation. But unlike other legendary snipers, Sarah's reputation was built on saving lives rather than taking them. When possible, she disabled rather than killed. When killing was necessary, she did it cleanly and quickly, without hesitation but also without pleasure. Years later, when Sarah was asked about her unusual career path, she would always credit 3 people: Ghost, who developed the techniques that made her abilities possible; Miguel, who taught her wisdom along with marksmanship; and the 3 hikers at Glacier Pass, who showed her that extraordinary abilities come with extraordinary responsibilities. The girl who couldn't miss had become the woman who chose her shots carefully, and the world was safer because of